He should not have lasted until noon. The small lion lay in the short grass like a dropped coat, ribs moving in shallow ripples, flies stitching at his eyes. Heat pressed down from a bleached sky. One more hour like this, and the cub would have slipped under, quiet as dust. Around him the plain held its breath. No pride, no mother, only the slow circling of vultures and the smell of hot earth. He was too young to know danger, yet his body knew thirst. He mewed once, a thin sound, then stopped to save what was left of his breath. The leopard moved like shade along the edge of thorn and grass. She had failed at dawn and now drifted, following faint mouse trails that meant food later. Milk still weighed her after the loss of her litter. The small cry reached her again, the kind that tugs even when you mean to ignore. She found him beneath an acacia, a lion cub, dusty and alone. Her stomach said food. Her shoulders rolled, muscles arranged for a pounce. Then he coughed, an ugly, wet rattle, and his head wobbled as if too heavy for the neck. The leopard did a thing predators pretend not to do. She hesitated. She stepped closer and tasted the air. No fresh lion scent. The vultures edged lower. The leopard touched the cub with the tip of her nose. He did not flinch. His skin was too warm. His breath shivered but did not lift his ribs enough. For a heartbeat, the old switchboard of instinct crackled. End a life or hold it up. The cub tried to push forward and failed. He made a sound that did not belong to any hunt. The leopard hooked her whiskers forward, let out a low breath, and chose. She took him the way mothers take their own, by the scruff, teeth careful and jaw steady. His paws hung, limp at first, then tucked in as reflex woke. She threaded the brush toward her tree. Her world rose from the flat land. A fig with limbs thick as hips, bark black with age. She had used it for years, a room above the trouble of the plain. It kept hyenas below and lions at a distance. Now she climbed with the cub held like a node in her mouth, trusting old routes. Where 3 branches crossed, she set him down. The platform smelled of old milk and rain. The cub sagged onto his belly, eyes half open, breath shallow. The leopard began to lick him the way memory told her to do. Rough tongue from nose to tail, again and again, not only to clean but to coax blood to move. The flies gave up. After a while the little body shivered on its own. That was good. She lay alongside him, curved like a wall to keep him from the drop, and listened as the day pushed forward. Down below, light moved across the grass. Baboons passed, eyeing the tree and keeping clear. Clouds built and blew apart. The cub slept and woke and slept again. When evening stretched the shadows thin, she guided him toward her belly. Milk came on its own, a warm relief. The cub latched weakly, then stronger, and after a long time he stopped shaking. Leopard milk is not lion milk. It is tuned for a smaller body that grows in trees, yet it carried what any young animal needs first: water, fat, and the old messages of antibodies. It steadied him. Through the night, she kept her chin on his back so she could feel the rise and fall. Owls blinked in the fig, and hyenas laughed beyond the ridge. Once a distant roar rolled over the plain. The cub twitched but did not wake. Dawn came on silent feet. On the second morning, the leopard left only long enough to drink. Before she went, she nudged him deeper into the nook, then returned twice as quickly as she had planned, the old anxiety tying knots. She was not supposed to worry like this. Worry is costly for a hunter, but the body that had made milk had also made room for worry. She accepted that and settled back into stillness. By the third day, the little lion could lift his head and look around. The world he saw was leaf and light, not grass and herds. He scooted toward the branch edge, curious, and the leopard blocked him with a foreleg. He complained, a dry rasp that pretended to be brave. She ignored the sound and licked his cheek. She began to teach without knowing the word for teaching. She showed him how to cling with the front claws and spread the hind toes for balance. Each lesson was a minute long, then rest. His paws were broad and heavy. His claws did not bite as deep as hers. More than once he slid and knocked his chin, surprised and insulted. She caught him each time, teeth again at the scruff, restoring order. He did not learn like a leopard. He learned like a lion, trying to borrow a skill. When he tired, he tucked himself against the curve of her belly. When he woke, he nosed for milk, and the ache in her softened. Late that week, a hot wind came off the bare flats. The leopard hunted after sunset, slipping away to pull down a scrub hare. She ate little and carried the rest up, worrying it into small, soft pieces he could manage. The smell brought a pair of jackals to the base. They paced and whined, then drifted off. On a bright morning, the first test came. The leopard had gone for a short drink. A gust shook the figure. The cub, inching along the inner branch, lost his footing. He scrabbled, claws clicking, hind legs sliding to the side. For a blink he hung, belly over open air. She reached him in a single, silent burst, scooped him by the neck, and pulled him up, heart punching at her ribs. The cub sprawled, shocked, then began to wail, an unhappy, breathy sound that said too much. She lay over him, humming a low, steady purr, the sound cats used to bind panic back into the body. It took a long minute before he stopped. That night she did not hunt. She kept him pinned between her forelegs and watched the sky. In this small, private space the world felt safe, but the plain below did not forget. Lions moved there. Hyenas stitched their routes along the washes. The leopard knew all of that, and still chose the risk of staying above. Days folded. The cub grew a little heavier. His breath, which had rattled, eased some, though mornings were still hard. The leopard learned the rhythm of those struggles and licked his chest when the air seemed too thick. She had no plan beyond the next sun and shade, beyond hunger and rest. Still, a shape was forming, a life joined to another that was never meant to be joined. One evening, as the light thinned to copper, the leopard heard lions beyond the ridge. A low, rolling chorus. It could have meant a returning mother or another pride staking the ground. She lifted her head, ears angled, and listened until the calls died away. The cub breathed against her, small and trusting. The leopard did not move. When the moon climbed, the wind turned and brought the smell of far rain. The cub slept. The leopard kept watch and let herself think a thought she almost never allowed, that perhaps this might hold, that the small lion might thread the days on her branch until his legs were certain and his chest strong, and that somehow the plain below would forgive their bargain. Near dawn, the branch creaked. The leopard drew him closer with a forepaw and closed her eyes for a moment. Down on the plain, a hyena crossed the grass, nose working. Above, high in the fig, a lion cub dozed in a nest that was not built for him, under the breath of a mother who was not his kind. Light came soft and slow, and with it the question that would not leave. Could care keep him where his body could not? She knew dawn would bring heat and flies, and the first real hunt she could not avoid. If she left, he would be alone with the empty air and the long drop. If she stayed, hunger would sharpen the plains below. She listened to his breathing and counted heartbeats, promising only the next one. Far off, a single vulture tipped its wing and waited. The tree creaked again. The leopard opened one eye, measuring the distance to the ground and the weight in her body, and understood that love had already tied her to a path with no safe turn. By the next days, the cub's breaths no longer rattled like loose beads. They were still shallow in the mornings, but milk and warmth kept him inside the narrow line where life holds. He learned the smell of the fig before he learned the smell of grass. When he woke, he pressed his face into the leopard's belly as if there were answers there. The leopard gave him small lessons between long sleeps. A lesson never lasted more than a minute. His strength burned fast and left him dull. She showed how to place forepaws first, how to let the hind paws find the bark, how to lean his chest toward the trunk when the wind shifted. She did not hurry. Cats do not explain, they demonstrate and repeat until the body understands. Still, he slipped often. His paws were broad for a life on the ground. His claws were meant to anchor in turf, not to bite deep into wood. Each slide bruised his pride and made him bolder the next hour, as if courage could fix physics. Hunger did what teaching could not. After sunset, she hunted near, then far, choosing what she could carry high in her mouth. Hares, ground birds, a young dick taken fast and clean. She ate little and brought the rest up. Before he could manage meat, she chewed each piece until it was soft, pressing it to his mouth with the certainty of a mother that has already decided for him. The salt on his tongue woke something ancient. He made a sound that was not quite a purr and not yet a growl. On warmer afternoons, she let him stand on the main branch while she stretched along a limb above, a guardrail of muscle and habit. Baboons sometimes came near, drawn by the smell of meat. They watched with mean eyes and kept their distance from her, but they watched the cub too long. The leopard lowered her head and showed teeth without sound. The baboons moved on, pretending they had not been interested. The problem did not leave because love asked it to. The cub's weight grew the way lion weight grows, quick in the shoulders, honest in the bones. He could not tuck himself into the elbows of branches as she could. He needed wide, flat places. When he tried to sidle along a narrow spur after her, his center of gravity argued and won. The bark polished under his paws. His claws could not retract as fully as hers, so the tips blunted and slid. She learned to place her body on the outside of every lesson, a living fence against the drop. When the air turned wet after a short storm, his chest complained again. In the hours before dawn, he panted with his mouth open, pulling for air that felt heavy. She licked his ribs in slow runs to calm the muscles and kept him pressed to the warm skin under her foreleg. The rain left the bark dark and slick. The fig smelled like metal. There were small winds. He could cross the fork now without help. He could turn himself around without pretending it had been an accident. He learned to keep his tail still when he needed balance. He learned to nap without sliding. Each victory was a quiet thing, a detail, and the leopard counted them as if numbers could hold back gravity. Once, late morning, a hornbill landed too close to the meat scraps. The cub, feeling important, crept toward it along the inner branch. He pressed his body low like he had seen the leopard do. The bird hopped twice, cool and unimpressed. The cub bunched, sprang, and discovered that the world after a leap is made of consequences. His front claws kissed the bark and then lost it. His body swung. For a breath, he was a pendulum over air. The leopard's paw locked over his spine and pinned him flat. The hornbill flapped away, laughing in its hard voice. The cub hid his face in her fur and learned another quiet rule. The branch always wins when you lie about your limits. Days reached for one another and made a week. The leopard started taking him down to the lowest crotch of the tree at dusk so his feet could feel the ground. She let him walk a few steps in the grass where the earth did not move under him. He sniffed everything, wide-eyed, then begged to go back up. The ground was full of smells and also full of noises too large for his chest. Up high, the world was small and predictable. Up high, he was hers. One evening, heat pooled in the valley. A wind came late, mean and restless. It set the leaves talking and pressed the tree to one side, then the other. The leopard felt the change all through the bark. She rose, guiding the cub deeper into the safe fork, and settled to block him in. The wind eased, then quit, and the plain below sighed the way plains do when they are making up their mind for a storm. The storm arrived after dark without rain, all gust and grit. The fig creaked. Loose twigs rattled like dry bones. The cub tried to be brave and failed honestly. He pressed himself to her chest, then rolled away to prove something to himself, then pressed back again. When the gusts paused, crickets resumed their work, as if to remind both of them that the world has other plans than fear. Near midnight, a smell of hyena blew up the slope. It was faint, but it pulled old maps into the leopard's head. She stood, done with waiting, and moved along the limb to test the air beyond the leaves. The cub, unwilling to be left, slid after her. She turned and nudged him back. He whined once, a small injured sound, and planted his feet. The wind shoved again. The branch rolled under his weight. In the next breath, everything happened at once. A gust took the leaves and flattened them. Grit stung their eyes. The cub's hind paws lost their argument with the bark and skated. He reached for her with both forepaws, claws out, and caught nothing but her fur. It did not hold. His body rotated, belly to the open, tail a useless rudder, and then he dropped. He did not fall clean. His shoulder struck a lower limb with a sound that belonged to wood, not to flesh. The hit turned him and threw him again, slower now, toward the shadowed trunk. The leopard came down the tree the way water comes down stone, head first, claws cutting furrows. She launched blind into the dark and swiped for him, missed by the width of a whisker, and landed hard, half on a branch, half in air. Her back feet found bark and held. She sprang again. The cub hit the ground on his side and went quiet. The air slammed out of his lungs with a hollow grunt. For a long count, nothing moved but the dust. The leopard dropped the last stretch, the way only a leopard can, and slid across grass to him, all speed and no noise. She pressed her head to his neck, searching for the small thrum. It was there, thin and fast, like a bird trapped under skin. She licked his mouth open and pulled his tongue forward so the airway cleared, then covered his ribs with her foreleg to cut the tremors of shock. Hyena's scent thickened and drifted away again. They had not heard the fall or did not care yet. The plane, rude and busy, continued with its night. A minute passed, or many. The cub gasped, then gasped again, each pull a scrape. For a moment, half his body would not obey. When he tried to stand, his front legs remembered how, and the back refused. The leopard crowded him until he stayed down. She nosed along his shoulder blade and found a place that made him flinch hard. Nothing hung wrong, but pain flooded the muscles and made its own laws. The base of the fig was not safe now. The wind still ran low over the ground, hunting smells. She could not carry him up. The angle and his weight would turn both of them into a story for hyenas. She took his scruff and dragged him a short distance into a dark cradle where buttress roots met. There the earth cupped them. She curled around him, putting her spine to the open, her belly to his shaking side. Every few breaths, she lifted his lip with her nose to watch the color of his gums, counting the time between pulls of air the way hunters count the time between lightning and thunder. Rain began in fat, uncertain drops, the kind that test the world before they commit. She sheltered his face with hers and let the water cool the heat from his skin. He dozed, then jerked awake, confused by pain. She hummed the low, constant line that had comforted him since the first day. A small line of ants found the place where meat had fallen earlier and marched past his paw. He watched them with cloudy eyes as if the rhythm of their work could lend him a shape to hold. Toward dawn his breath lengthened from scraps to strips, not easy, but regular. The shoulder would stiffen by noon. She knew that from a lifetime of knocks. It would keep him from climbing for days, maybe longer. Up was close to them for now. Up was where they had almost lost everything. The light came slow and made a pale lid over the clouds. Hyenas laughed somewhere beyond the wash, busy with someone else's mistake. The leopard kept still and measured the cost of the night. Love had not built him claws for trees. Love had not changed the weight of his bones. Love, stubborn as a root-splitting rock, had only kept her here to pay attention when the wind made its choice. When the rain eased to a drift, she lifted her head and looked at the first branch, the one she had always trusted. It waited, slick and high, patient with all its history. She looked back at the small lion pressed to her side, at the rhythm that had almost gone out, and accepted a new rule that felt like a wound. For a while the ground would have to be their home. She lowered her head again, pressed her chin between his ears, and watched the dark lift from the grass, counting breaths and not yet thinking about the climb back into the world they had just fallen from. 2 weeks on the ground passed before the cub's shoulder eased. The leopard dug a den under the fig, safe from rain, and hunted at dusk for quick meals. The cub lay quiet, eating, sleeping, and staring at the roots like a door to another world. When he was stronger, she let him up again, only to low branches. He tried, always tried, but his growing body was heavy, paws broad, balance poor. He was built for ground, not for bark. She taught patience, careful steps, but excitement drove him forward faster than sense. They practiced hunts. She crept and waited. He rushed too soon, missing francolins and hares. On the ground, he sometimes caught prey with brute speed, but in trees he failed. His lungs fought after storms, coughing in thick air until she calmed him with warmth and licks. There were winds, learning to freeze when she froze, testing the wind with whiskers, catching a hare in the grass. But each gain reminded her he was not a leopard. His weight bent safe branches, bark stripped under his steps. One storm ended the argument. Thunder shook the valley, wind tore at the figure. They climbed halfway to avoid hyenas. Rain slammed down, lightning cracked. The cub slipped, caught, then lost the bark. The limb cracked under his weight. She lunged, caught fur, but he fell. He struck a lower branch, then the ground. When she reached him, one leg bent wrong, ribs bruised, breath shallow. She covered him from hail and growled at circling hyenas until they turned away. His cries cut into the storm, then faded into exhaustion. She dragged him into a pocket against the trunk, licking the swelling, keeping him warm. By dawn, rain eased. The leg was ruined for now, maybe forever. She knew injuries meant death in the wild. Yet when he blinked at her and pressed his nose to her chin, trust still lived in him. She lowered her head, accepted the truth. The tree in her world would kill him. Morning would demand a choice she could no longer avoid. Morning looked calm, but the cub lay weak, legs swollen, ribs sore. The leopard kept him still beneath the fig's roots. The tree was no longer safe. Staying meant hyenas. She scouted and smelled men near the ridge, their outpost beyond the valley. She had watched them before, fixing water, handling animals. Her world of trees and stealth was killing the cub. She knew it. At dusk, she dragged him carefully through grass, pausing often. A jackal followed briefly, then left. By dark, she reached the ridge and hid him under a thorn bush beside a path people used. She lay with him until moonrise, memorizing his weight and breath. At dawn, 2 people came, a woman with a box, a man with a mug. They crouched, cautious. The cub turned his head toward the voice, trusting. They slid a blanket beneath, lifted him into the crate. His eyes found the leopard. He made a faint sound. She almost revealed herself, but stayed still, watching them carry him away. She followed far enough to see him taken inside a low building. For days she returned to the fence, catching his scent mixed with medicine. She saw the wrap on his leg, the drip tube, his slow recovery. Each evening she watched, hidden, while people cared for him. On the 3rd day she returned to the figure. The fallen branch lay where it had broken. She climbed higher, saw the outpost roof beyond the ridge. That night she hunted well for the first time in weeks. Later she saw them load him into a stronger crate and drive toward the plain where young lions learn again. Dust rose and did not return. She stood at the road, then turned back to her tree. The bond had thinned to a thread, but it held, stretched between her branches and the lion's new world.